The security guard grabbed her arm before she even had a chance to close her laptop. "Miss Adaeze, Okafor." His voice was flat, rehearsed. The kind of voice used on people who weren't supposed to argue back. She looked up slowly from her desk. Her former desk, she supposed, at the 43rd floor of KS Holdings' Seoul headquarters. The floor had gone quiet in that particular way offices do when everyone is watching but pretending not to. Keyboard stopped clicking. Coffee cups froze midway to mouths. Even the ventilation system seemed to hold its breath. "That would be me," she said. The guard didn't meet her eyes. "You're to collect your personal belongings and come with me." Behind him stood Director Yoon Sung-jae, head of financial compliance, a man whose entire personality was the color beige. He wore the expression of someone who had just done something he was proud of. Next to him, her direct supervisor, Ji-hai, looked at her shoes. Adaeze didn't move immediately. She looked at the printed termination, noticed the guard set on her desk. Gross insubordination. Breach of confidentiality protocols. Effective immediately. She read it twice. Then she stood, slowly, the way her grandmother had taught her to stand in rooms that wanted her small. "For the record," she said, and her voice carried across the floor the way she intended it to, "I submitted that report through the proper internal ethics channel, exactly as the company handbook requires. What's in it is true. Every figure, every date, every transaction, and terminating me doesn't make it less true." Director Yoon smiled thinly. Escort her out. What happened in the next 3 minutes would be replayed in her mind for weeks. Not the walk to the elevator. She had her chin up for that, her box of belongings tucked under one arm, her expression giving nothing away. Not the lobby, where 2 receptionists watched her with wide, uncertain eyes. Not even the revolving door that deposited her onto the gray Seoul morning. What she would remember was the sound of applause starting somewhere on the 43rd floor. Not for her. For Director Yoon. She heard it as the elevator descended, muffled through the steel doors. Someone cheering. Then more than one person. They were celebrating. If you've ever worked somewhere that punished honesty, you already know the particular weight of that moment. The specific, airless silence of being right about something and being made to suffer for it anyway. Adaeze stood on the pavement outside KS Holdings' glass tower and breathed. Seoul moved around her. The morning commuters, the food delivery bikes weaving through traffic, the distant Han River glinting silver in the gaps between buildings. She had been in this city for 11 months. She had 3 weeks left on her internship contract. Or she had, until 40 minutes ago. She pulled out her phone. 12 missed calls from her mother in Lagos. She wasn't ready for that conversation yet. She opened her banking app instead. The number was what it was. Then she opened the encrypted folder she had backed up at 3 a.m. the night before, when she had understood that sending the report might mean exactly this. Everything was there. Every document. Every shadow transaction. Every name. She exhaled. She had done the right thing. The right thing had cost her everything. And she would figure out what came next. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that 14 floors above the floor she'd just been ejected from, in a corner office that didn't appear on any public directory, a man was being handed a report of his own. Han Jae-won read slowly. That was one of the things his people had learned about him, that he read everything himself, and that he read it slowly, and that the slowness was not stupidity. It was the opposite. He was 36 years old. He had run the Hanil network, what the financial press diplomatically called a diversified private investment group, and what the Korean organized crime division called something entirely different, for 8 years since his father's stroke had transferred power to him at 28. In those 8 years, he had restructured debts, eliminated rivals who couldn't be bought rivals who couldn't be eliminated, and quietly extended the network's reach into 9 legitimate sectors. KS Holdings was the newest and most important of those sectors. It had cost him 4 years, and an amount of money he did not allow himself to think about in round numbers. And someone, apparently, had been stealing from it. "The intern," said his deputy, Park Min-jun, standing at a careful distance from the desk. Min-jun had worked for Jae-won for 6 years and had learned exactly how much space to occupy in a room where his employer was displeased. The intern submitted the report, Jae-won said. He was still reading. Yoon Sung-jae terminated her for it. Correct. J1 turn a page. And the report is accurate? A pause. Our preliminary read suggests it is largely accurate, yes. Largely. There are some figures that may require verification, but the core allegations. The core allegations, J1 said, indicate that Director Yoon has been routing funds through 3 shell subsidiaries and paying himself a sum that is, he looked at the page, approximately 400 million won above his authorized compensation. And the intern found this. She was assigned to the compliance audit team. She had access to the relevant. She found it, J1 repeated, and then she reported it through the official channel. And then Yoon had her removed. He set the report down on his desk. He looked at it for a moment, the way a man looks at something that has just rearranged his understanding of a situation. Find her. Min Jun hesitated. The termination has already been processed. She's been escorted from the building. The legal team has a non-disclosure. She hasn't signed anything yet. Not yet. Yoon was going to have it couriered to her today with a settlement offer. J1 stood. He was tall for a Korean man of his generation, lean in the way of someone for whom physical condition was a professional requirement rather than a personal interest. He moved to the floor-to-ceiling window. Below, the city spread out in its ordered complexity. Find her, he said again, before the courier does. Adaeze had been sitting in the cafe for 2 hours when the man in the gray suit sat down across from her without being invited. She looked at him over the rim of her coffee cup. He was perhaps 40, neat, the kind of unremarkable that took effort to achieve. He set a business card on the table. It had no name on it, just a number. Miss Okafor, he said, I've been asked to find you. By whom? Someone who read your report. Her hand around the coffee cup did not move. My report that got me fired this morning. Your report that got you fired this morning, he confirmed, and that has created a significant problem for some people who would like it to have never existed, and a significant opportunity for someone else who would like it to go much further. He paused. You haven't signed the NDA. I haven't signed anything. Good. Please don't. He slid the card further across the table. The number on that card. Tonight, 7 o'clock. There's a restaurant on Ubgujong-aro called Chong. The reservation will be under park. And if I don't come, the man in the gray suit considered this. Then you fly back to Lagos with your principles and your evidence and your correctly submitted ethics report, and nothing changes. Yoon keeps his position. The money stays missing. And the people who should have protected you don't. He stood. He left. He didn't look back. Adaeze looked at the card for a long time. She thought about Lagos, about the scholarship money she'd exhausted, about her mother's phone calls, about the 11 months she'd spent building toward a career in international finance that had just been cut off at the knees by a man who applauded his own wrongdoing. She thought about who in Seoul would know she'd been fired before noon on a Tuesday and care enough to find her within 2 hours. She put the card in her pocket. The restaurant was the kind of place that didn't post its menu online. It sat behind a door with no sign, on a street where the other establishments all had signs, as if the absence was itself a kind of statement. A hostess materialized when Adaeze arrived and led her through a series of rooms, each quieter than the last, to a private dining room at the back. Han Jae-won was already there. She knew who he was before he said a word. Not because she recognized him specifically, his public profile was almost non-existent, but because of how the room organized itself around him. The 2 men standing at the edges of it. The quality of the silence. The way he sat, not with the loose sprawl of a man relaxing, but with the contained stillness of a man conserving energy. He stood when she entered. That surprised her. Miss Okafor. His English was accented but precise, the product, she would later learn, of a postgraduate year at LSE and years of necessity. Thank you for coming. I haven't decided anything yet, she said. She sat down across from him, the way she'd stood outside KS Holdings that morning. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because the appearance of fear was a negotiating position she couldn't afford. He looked at her for a moment, not the way men sometimes looked at her, assessing, categorizing, but with something closer to appraisal. The way you look at a bridge before deciding whether it will hold your weight. You submitted a report that correctly identified embezzlement at a company that belongs to me, he said. She absorbed the information and arranged her face accordingly. Belongs to me. KS Holdings. KS Holdings. Among others. You're the owner. In relevant respects. She understood, then, what manner of man she was sitting across from. The understanding settled through her like cold water, floor by floor. She should leave. Every sensible instinct she possessed said she should stand up, walk out of this beautiful, airless room, and spend the night booking a flight home. She did not stand up. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Everything that's in the backup you made at 3 in the morning, he said. She went very still. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You accessed the secure server at 2:47 a.m. using your compliance credentials. You ran export functions on 7 months of transaction data." He paused. "Our security logs are thorough." "If your security logs are that thorough," she said carefully, "you already know what's in the files. I know what you want hidden. I don't yet know everything he managed to hide, or who helped him." His voice was even. "You spent 4 months looking at those records. You found what our own compliance team missed. I want to know what else you found." And in exchange, the silence stretched. A server appeared. Left T disappeared. J1 poured her cup before his own. She noticed that too. "In exchange," he said, "I clear your termination record. I provide the verification your report requires to be acted upon by the appropriate regulatory authorities. And I compensate you for the remainder of your internship at triple the rate." "That's generous," she said. "It's practical. You have something I need." "People who say practical," Adaeze said, "usually mean they're not going to tell you the whole picture." She looked at him directly. "The regulatory path you're describing, it would require me to testify. My name would be attached to all of it. I would be a witness against a man you just told me works for you, which means I'd be making an enemy of everyone who works around him, and I'd be doing it in a foreign country with no legal protection and apparently no job." She let that sit for a beat. "So tell me the whole picture." He looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted slightly in his expression. Not softened exactly. Recalibrated. "The whole picture," he said, "is that Yoon has been stealing from me for 16 months and selling information to a competitor. That competitor is preparing to use that information in a way that would damage not just my company, but several hundred people who depend on it for their livelihoods. I have 7 days, possibly fewer, to stop that from happening. Your data gives me the legal mechanism to have Yoon removed, his access revoked, and the damage contained before it becomes public. And the competitor?" A pause. "That I handle separately." She understood what separately meant in this context. She filed it away. "I want something else," she said. "Name it. I want a contract. Signed. In my name. Before I give you anything." She held his gaze. "I've already submitted one report in good faith and been thrown out of the building for it. I don't do anything else on trust alone." He studied her face. She wondered what he was reading there, stubbornness, she suspected, and possibly something that looked like fear, but wasn't. "My legal team will have a draft to you by 9 a.m., he said. She reviewed the contract in her hotel room with a lawyer she called in Lagos on video, a cousin who had passed the bar 2 years ago and charged her nothing because he understood the situation. They went through it line by line. It was comprehensive. It named her. It included protections she hadn't thought to ask for. At 11 p.m., she signed it. At 11:15 p.m., she received a message from an unsaved number. "Thank you. Min-jun will come for the data at 8 a.m. She stared at the message for a while. Then, for reasons she didn't fully examine, she typed back, "You had this contract drafted before we met tonight." The response came after a few minutes. "I had it drafted before I sent someone to find you." She put her phone down. She looked at the ceiling of her hotel room. She thought about what kind of man plans that far ahead, and whether that was reassuring or terrifying. She concluded, eventually, that it was both. The next 4 days moved the way crises do, not in a straight line, but in concentric circles that pulled tighter with each pass. Adaeze worked in the private offices of a KS Holdings subsidiary that Yoon had no connection to, in a room with a window that looked out at a courtyard, alongside 2 forensic accountants who had the dedicated focus of people who had been asked to find something important and told to find it fast. She walked them through the data. She explained her methodology. She answered their questions and asked her own, and the picture that emerged across 3 whiteboards and 1 very long spreadsheet was worse than her original report had indicated. Yoon hadn't been working alone. There were 3 other names. 2 of them were mid-level. One of them was someone Adaeze had sat next to in compliance training on her first week, a man named Dae-young who had brought her coffee and shown her where the good vending machine was. "I'm sorry," one of the accountants said, watching her face. "Don't be," she said. "It doesn't change the numbers." She didn't see Han Jae-won in those first 2 days. She received updates through Min Jun, who was precise and largely expressionless, and once a short message on her phone. "The regulatory filing will proceed Thursday. Your name is protected under whistleblower provisions." Min Jun has details. On the evening of the 3rd day, he appeared. She was still at the whiteboard when she heard the door. She didn't turn around immediately. "The accountants went home 3 hours ago," he said. "I know. I found something." She heard him cross the room. He stopped at a distance that was respectful, professional, and looked at what she'd written. "This account," she said, pointing. "It's not in the data I exported. I found a reference in a metadata string. A ghost record, essentially. Someone deleted the transactions, but didn't scrub the index." She looked at him. "Whoever created this account knew your systems well enough to know what to delete. But they didn't know about the index, because it's not documented in the system manual. It's a legacy function from the original build." He was quiet for a moment. "How did you know about the index?" "I asked your IT archivist on my 3rd day because I thought the system was inefficient and wanted to understand the architecture." She paused. "I was an intern. Interns ask questions." Something moved across his face that might, under other circumstances, have been a smile. "What does the ghost account tell us?" "It tells us where the rest of the money went. There's a significant sum that doesn't show up anywhere in my original report. I think because Yoon moved it out before I started looking." She turned back to the board. "But the transfer destination is here. If you have any visibility into this institution," she tapped a name, "you can recover it." He pulled out his phone. He made a call in Korean, his voice low. She didn't speak Korean. She understood fragments, enough to know the call was short and decisive. He hung up. "That account will be frozen by midnight," he said. "Good." She capped the marker. "Then I think we have everything." She turned around fully and found that he was closer than she'd registered. The room was quiet. The whiteboard behind her was covered in numbers that had kept her awake for 3 nights. And she was tired in the clean way that comes after something has been finished rather than in the hollow way that comes from defeat. "You did this," he said. "All of it." "I did my job," she said. "Which is what I was trying to do when your director threw me out of a building." "I know." He held her gaze. "I should have said that earlier. I'm sorry for what happened to you." She looked at him carefully. "An apology from you is a strange thing to receive," she said. "I imagine it is. I've been working next to your accountants for 3 days, and none of them have told me who you actually are, because they're afraid of you. The man who found me in the cafe wouldn't tell me your name. Min Jun communicates in a register that suggests he's been trained not to show emotion." She tilted her head. "And you're apologizing to me. Does that make the apology less valid?" She thought about it honestly. "No," she said. "It makes it more complicated." She thought that was the hardest conversation. It wasn't. The hard conversation came the next morning when the regulatory filing went in and Yoon, apparently informed by someone within his network that the net was closing, escalated. His version of escalation was to contact a journalist with a version of a story that positioned Adaeze as a foreign operative who had hacked KS Holdings systems and stolen proprietary data. The story went up at 7 a.m. By 8:30, it had been shared 600 times. By 9, it was trending. Adaeze read it in her hotel room. She read the comments under it. She put her phone face down on the bed and sat with her hands at her lap. Her phone buzzed. The unsaved number. "Don't respond to anything. My legal team is already moving. It will be addressed by noon." She typed back. "Your legal team being already moving doesn't help with the 600 people who think I'm a criminal." A pause. Then, "I'm coming to you." She looked at the message. She thought about saying no. She thought about what no would actually accomplish. She typed, "Hotel Neon, room 714. He arrived in 20 minutes. He came alone, which surprised her. He sat in the chair across from the bed. She was sitting on the edge of it, and he looked at her in that measuring way he had. Yoon's contact at the outlet is being pressured to retract. He'll retract by noon. He paused. The story was baseless. The evidence of your legitimate access credentials, your employment contract, and the chain of custody on your data will make that clear. I know it's baseless, she said. I know it will be retracted. I know that by the end of the week, there will be a much larger story that replaces this one. She looked at him. That doesn't change what the last 3 hours were. He was quiet. She appreciated that he didn't say, I understand, or I know, the reflexive condolences that people offer when they don't actually know what to say. What do you need? He asked instead. She thought about it. Nothing you can give me right now, she said. I'm going to call my mother. I'm going to take a shower. And then I'm going to come back to the office and finish what I started, because the alternative is letting him win, and I find I'm not willing to do that. He stood. He moved toward the door, then stopped. The day you submitted your report, he said, not turning around, I was in Singapore. I came back and found that Yoon had already terminated you and was managing the situation. If I had known, he stopped, seemed to decide something. You wouldn't have been in that elevator. She absorbed this. You can't promise that, she said. You didn't know me. No, he said, but I would have read the report before acting. A pause. That's all I can offer. It wasn't everything. It was, she thought, the most honest thing he could have said. He left. She called her mother. She cried during the call, briefly, while her mother said things in Igbo that required no translation. Then she took the shower, and she went back to the office. The story broke on Friday, as he had predicted, properly, with evidence, in 3 major outlets simultaneously. Yoon's termination was announced by KS Holdings Board, along with 3 others. The regulatory authority confirmed it was conducting an investigation. Adaeze's name appeared in one of the 3 articles, identified as the compliance analyst who had first raised the alarm. Compliance analyst, not intern. She noticed that. She suspected she wasn't meant to notice it, but she did. That evening, Min-jun informed her that the final documentation had been delivered to the regulatory authority and her engagement with KS Holdings was formally concluded. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a check that represented triple her monthly internship rate for the 3 weeks remaining on her contract, and a letter on KS Holdings' letterhead clearing her employment record. She folded both and put them in her bag. Is that everything? She asked Min-jun. Mr. Han would like to see you, if you have time. She looked at him. He couldn't ask me himself? Min-jun's expression did not change. He said to tell you it was a request, not a requirement, and that he would understand if you declined. She thought about declining. She thought about it seriously, the way you think about stepping back from a thing that has already moved you further than you intended to go. Fine, she said. Where? It wasn't the restaurant this time. It was the top floor of a building she hadn't been to before, not a KS Holdings property. Min-jun informed her carefully, a personal address, and a room she was shown in had 1 wall of glass and the entire Western Han River view and a table with 2 cups of tea already poured. She sat. He sat across from her. Outside, the river caught the last of the evening light and held it. You're leaving Seoul, he said. My visa situation is complicated now. She wrapped her hands around the cup. I need to regroup. Figure out next steps. I want to offer you a role, he said. She looked at him. You offer me a role. I took it. It's finished. A different role. He paused. My holdings operate across 14 sectors. My internal compliance function has been, as the last 3 weeks have demonstrated, inadequate. I want to rebuild it. Another pause. I want you to rebuild it. She studied his face. That's not an intern position. No, it will be a directorship, equal standing with my other division heads. The word equal sat between them. She turned it over. Your other division heads, she said slowly, are mostly Korean men who have worked for you for years and are, to varying degrees, afraid of you. I have been in your orbit for less than 2 weeks. I'm 26 years old. I'm Nigerian, and the last Korean company that employed me threw me out of a building. Yes, he said. Yes, what? Yes, all of that is true. He met her eyes. And you found what my own people missed. You held your position in front of a security guard, in front of a floor of people who were glad to see you go, and you told the truth because it was true. You negotiated a contract for me in a restaurant when you had every reason to be afraid and didn't show it. He paused. I don't want someone who is comfortable in my orbit, Miss Okafor. I want someone who is capable in it. She looked at the river. The light on it was changing, going amber. If I say yes, she said, I want the same contract framework we used last week. Clear scope, clear protections. My own counsel reviews everything. Agreed. I want direct reporting line to you, not through Min-jun. He considered this. Agreed. And if I find something wrong again, she said, I report it to you first. 1 week for internal resolution. After that, the external channel stays open. That's not negotiable. He was quiet for a long moment. The river turned gold outside the window. You're telling me, he said carefully, that you would go around me if I didn't act. I'm telling you that I would give you the chance to act first, she said. Because I think you would. But I'm not betting my career on trust alone. Not again. She thought she had miscalculated. The silence was long enough to make her wonder. Then something happened that she hadn't expected. He exhaled slowly, and something in his posture shifted, like a door that has been held shut finally allowed to settle on its hinges. My father ran this network through fear, he said. Everyone was afraid of him, including his family. When it came to me, I decided that wasn't the organization I wanted to lead. He paused. I don't always succeed, but that is what I decided. He looked at her. What you just told me, the external channel, that is fear operating correctly. That is how a system with accountability is supposed to work. She searched his face. Most men in your position wouldn't say that. Most men in my position haven't had someone blow up their compliance department from the inside and then reconstruct it from scratch in 4 days. He leaned forward just slightly. Will you take the role? She didn't answer him that night. She asked for 2 days, and he gave them to her without pressure, which she noticed. She spent those 2 days in her hotel room, calling people she trusted. Her cousin the lawyer, a mentor from her master's program in London, her mother, who listened to the entire situation and said, in the dry way that was her particular genius, this man is either the most dangerous person you have ever met or the most interesting. Possibly both. Be careful which one you let matter more. She thought about that for a long time. She thought about what it meant to build something real inside a structure that was, by any conventional measure, not entirely legitimate. She thought about what it meant to walk away from it, back to Lagos, back to the job market, carrying the story of how she'd been fired from her internship in Seoul and turned into something that toppled 4 executives and triggered a regulatory investigation. She thought about Han Jae-won's face when she'd told him about the external channel. Not defensive, not offended, relieved, as if someone had finally said the thing that made the structure make sense. She thought about the river in the evening light. On the second day, she called Min-jun. Tell him yes, she said, and tell him I'm having my cousin review the contract before I sign anything. Min-jun's voice, for the first time in their acquaintance, warmed by approximately 2 degrees. Of course, Miss Okafor. Welcome to KS Holdings. That's Director Okafor, she said. A pause. Of course, Director Okafor. The first board meeting she attended was 6 weeks later. She walked in with a folder she'd spent 10 days preparing and sat down at a table where 12 men looked at her with a range of expressions from curious to alarmed. Han Jae-won sat at the head. He did not introduce her. He said, simply, you've all received Director Okafor's preliminary audit framework. She'll walk you through it. She stood. She opened her folder. She began. She was 4 minutes in, past the point where the framework started to make people uncomfortable, which was the point, when one of the board members interrupted. He was a man named Chairman Bae, 63, who had the specific confidence of a person who had never been contradicted by someone who looked like her. This is very thorough, he said, in a tone that meant the opposite. But I wonder if it might be excessive for her. Chairman Bae, she said, and her voice carried exactly as far as it needed to. The last time this organization's compliance was considered adequate, Director Yoon was stealing approximately 400 million won. She paused. I'm happy to adjust the framework downward if you can show me where I've overestimated the risk. I'll wait. The silence in the room was the same quality as the silence on the 43rd floor of KS Holdings 6 weeks before, but it felt entirely different. She waited. Chairman Bae did not produce a counterargument. She continued her presentation. Afterward, walking out of the building, she pulled out her phone and typed a message to the unsaved number that she had at some point. Save under a name she kept simple. JW. Your Chairman Bay has 3 properties in a jurisdiction that doesn't align with his disclosed assets. I flagged it in the appendix, but you might want to be aware. The response came in under a minute. I saw it. He's already been contacted by my legal team. She smiled briefly at her phone. Then she put it away and walked into the Seoul afternoon. There would be more board meetings, more folders, more men with Chairman Bay's particular brand of confidence. There would be moments when she questioned whether she was building something or decorating a structure that would never fully change. But there would also be evenings when the river turned gold and a man across a table who had power and chose, deliberately, to share it. Not because it made him weaker, but because he understood that the right person at your side was not a threat. It was the difference between a network and an empire, between fear and something that might eventually last. She would figure out what it was in time. She thought she had a little of it already. If you've ever been told that doing the right thing will cost you, and found out they were correct, then you know that the cost is sometimes the beginning, not the end. Adaeze Okafor walked into KS Holdings as an intern and was thrown out for telling the truth. She walked back in as something else entirely. Not because someone rescued her, because she held her position long enough for the truth to catch up with the people who tried to bury it. And the man who gave her the role didn't do it out of obligation. He did it because he recognized, finally, in a room with a whiteboard covered in numbers at 10:30 at night, that the most dangerous thing in any organization isn't an enemy. It's someone who is right. Like this story? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I love hearing from listeners all over the world, and reading your comments genuinely makes my day. If this is the kind of storytelling that kept you hooked, subscribe so you never miss a new story. I upload every week, and the next one is already in progress. And if you know someone who would love this kind of romance with real depth and real stakes, share it with them. Let's keep this community growing. See you in the next one.